Chapter 5. Boxer graduates to college, prison. Supermarkets, gas stations, and jewelry stores were all targets. Over the course of a year, Boxer and Johnny Macias paired up to do a robbery about once a week, every time they ran out of money. Their favorite spots were large supermarkets that were next to a freeway for a quick escape and miles away from their Cerritos neighborhood. Each heist was usually good for at least a couple $1,000s, sometimes twice that much. They used a similar MO every time. They parked the getaway car nearby, went in together like regular customers, waited in line with a carton of cigarettes, pulled back a shirt tail to expose the butt of a handgun in their waistbands, said calmly, "This is a robbery," and cleaned out all the cash registers, the petty cash vault up front, and all the cash that customers had in their wallets. Victims were ordered to put all the money in brown grocery bags. Boxer was strung out on heroin all the time and usually carried a .45 automatic pistol. Occasionally, he had to put the gun in a reluctant cashier's face and cock it, but he considered himself a polite bandit, not mean. Some witnesses might have argued that point. He ordered a night manager at a market basket in Bellflower, "Stop or I'll blow you away." And Boxer told a cashier in an Alpha Beta store in Lakewood that he would blow his fucking head off. Police reports were replete with statements from victims who were in fear for his life or afraid for his life. However, he never stole anyone's wedding ring, and no one was ever pistol whipped, shot, or beaten. Afterward, the alarm always came in the police. Two male Hispanics fleeing on foot. But as they drove off, one of them always lay down on the floorboards while the other one drove. They'd also change clothes on the way. Also, no one ever chased them. The supermarket robberies worked like a charm over and over again. That is until they met off-duty officer Howard Dailies on February 17, 1981. He's a young cop's cop, a big, quick-thinking, good-looking ex-military man with blue eyes, blonde hair, and excellent instincts. Dailies was always the first one through the door on search warrants. He had just gotten off the night shift at the Placentia Police Department and had driven his motorcycle to an Alpha Beta store in Buena Park, just a few blocks away from his apartment, to pick up some cigarettes on his way home. On his way through the automatic doors, he saw two young Mexican-American teenagers walk in right behind him. Inside, next to the cigarette rack, he noticed the same two nervously looking around the store as if they were casing the place. As he grabbed some cigarettes and checked out, he noticed that Macias had disappeared and Boxer was standing in another line in front of the main entrance with a carton of non-filtered Camels. During every job, Boxer took a carton of Camels for himself and a carton of Salems for his mother. Outside, Dailies walked back to his bike, but a burning suspicion quickly brought him back to the front of the entrance where he stood behind a pillar. He saw Boxer brandishing a 6-inch butcher knife in a grocery checker's face and spotted the butt of a handgun tucked into Boxer's waistband. Macias was walking quickly up the main aisle in front of the checker counters. Daly sent his girlfriend, who had ridden with him, to telephone Buena Park police for backup. As Boxer stepped toward the double-door entrance exit and the automatic doors flew open, he heard in a loud voice clearly say, "Freeze." Officer Dailies, dressed in street clothes, stepped even closer to the front entrance, showing a badge in one hand and a .38 revolver in the other. The cop ordered him into a prone position, cuffed him, ripped a brown watch cap off his head, and discovered that the weapon in the crook's belt was only a Crossman repeater BB gun. The stolen cash and cigarettes were spilling out of a paper bag that lay next to him on the pavement. Macias ran to the back of the store as backup arrived. Other police officers swarmed the market and employees were herded into the manager's office as the voice of Corporal Kirby came over the intercom asking anyone left inside the store to slowly walk to the front with their hands in plain sight. 2 or 3 customers trickled down the aisles and out. 5 minutes later, Johnny Macias came walking down an aisle carrying a 5-pound bag of Quaker instant masa harina on his shoulder and wearing a big white cowboy hat and a brand new brown sweater he'd taken off the store shelves. He had stuffed the blue shirt he had on during the robbery inside a towel display on aisle 1, but Officer Jay Sells noticed that this approaching cowboy fit the general description of the second robbery suspect. He ordered Macias to put the bag of masa on the counter and his arms above his head, patted him down, and found a 6-inch steak knife in his right rear pocket. A 21-year-old grocery store clerk came over, lifted the cowboy hat, and said, "That's him, he's the one." The gig was up. Johnny at first protested to the cops, "I don't know anything, man." The total take was $1,128.83 and $15 worth of food coupons. Boxer and Johnny were locked up in the Orange County Jail, and for several days, Enriquez felt gut-wrenching sickness. "I threw up violently," said Boxer, and my cellmate asked, "What's wrong?" He described his symptoms, the sweats, and this constant weird feeling in his belly. There was no shortage of jailhouse junkies, and this cellie quickly had a diagnosis. "You're kicking, man, you're kicking." Boxer was going through heroin withdrawal, and he didn't even know it. I'd never been through that. If I ever felt even edgy, I always had heroin. I never ran out. I was never at a point where I couldn't get heroin. 5 weeks later, Boxer had shaved his mustache, but 10 witnesses picked him out of a lineup as the gunman in 3 different supermarket robberies, including the Alpha Beta holdup. That was only the beginning. Their similar MO made Boxer and Macias suspects in more than 24 robberies, and witnesses had an easy time remembering Boxer because of the butterfly and dragon tattoos prominently displayed on each side of his neck. Everybody in the world was identifying us, even for robberies we didn't even do. In April, he ended up pleading guilty to 21 counts of robbery in Orange County Superior Court and was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. That wasn't the end of it. Los Angeles County Sheriff's detectives tied him to another 8 robberies in their jurisdiction. Facing an additional 15 years behind bars, he made a deal with the district attorney's office and pleaded guilty to those 8 counts too. The probation officer's pre-sentencing report read, "The defendant, since the age of 14, has expressed a serious antisocial behavior which remains unabated and unchecked. His stated reason for committing the present offense was that he was strung out on heroin. The defendant's motivation to better his situation in life and his prognosis are considered non-existent. He recommended 12 years in prison." In anguish, John Enriquez, with the pain in his heart, addressed the court. "My son has been somewhat unknown to me because of a drug situation. I have never condoned violence, nor have I ever condoned breaking the law. But neither have I condoned the dispensation of drugs or the manufacturing of chemicals that are robbing our children of their mentality. This is the end result of what happens. I speak for millions of families that find themselves in the same situation. My son is not, and I'm sure thousands of parents will say the same thing. My son is a good man." Then on August 31st, 1981, a judge in Los Angeles County Superior Court added only 2 years and 8 months to Boxer's 7 years for a total sentence of 9 years and 8 months in state prison. This time, Johnny Macias got the same. Renee's mother and wife were weeping, but he was already resigned to the fact that he was headed to prison. Prison wasn't a bad thing back then. It was kind of like going to college. Once you got there, you're just considered a homeboy who's been to the joint. Homeboys who go to prison are considered veteranos. They're well respected in the neighborhood. It didn't seem to faze him. Maybe his father was right when he told the court that his son's mind was warped by the druggy gangster lifestyle. Rene Boxer Enriquez was only 18 years old, leg chained and cuffed as correction officers loaded him on a long bus. Inmates called it the Grey Goose, headed for Soledad Penitentiary, 6 hours away, upstate California. He wore a red jumpsuit with the words California Department of Corrections, CDC, stenciled on the back. A year earlier, he and other Arta gang members were having a party at Boxer's, smoking weed, drinking beer, and talking gangster bullshit. Homeboy Victor Ruiz said that if you're not a gang member of the Mexican Mafia, they'll kill you as soon as you get to prison. Boxer remembered thinking at the time, if I go to prison, I better get in the Mexican Mafia. But it was just a fleeting thought, one that didn't even matter in his mind as he sat on the Grey Goose smoking a cigarette and looking out the window at the California countryside. La M is supposed to be sacred, secret trust in which nobody speaks about being a member or asked to be a member. Don't seek the mafia, it finds you. As the Grey Goose continued to roll up Interstate 5, Boxer had no idea that the black hand would reach out and grab his mind, body, and soul, his entire life. The exploits of M Soldados were almost mythical to young gang members in the barrios, jails, and prison yards across the state. Boxer was no exception. When he arrived at Soledad, every tough-looking Mexican with tattoos and a mustache looked to him like a mafioso. Every Latino gang member from Southern California was known as a sureño, Southerner. And in prison, all norteños, Latino gang members from Northern California, all of whom were loyal to the Nuestra Familia, were the enemy. Battles between the two groups were constant. Only a punk didn't participate, and Boxer wasn't going to be a punk. He and his cellmate didn't hesitate to pounce unprovoked on a Nuestra Familia associate, rob him, and beat him on the head with the shaving can they found in his cell. After that incident, guards locked Boxer up in a disciplinary unit called the Management Control Unit, MCU, for advocating unrest and violence between sureños and norteños. On the first day in this new cell for troublemakers, he received a gift of cigarettes and a little note greeting him. It came from a man twice his age, locked up across the tier, a quiet, dangerous-looking convict with sunken dark eyes of a killer. His name was Daniel Barella, known as Black Dan. He was loved, respected, and full-fledged member of the murderous Mexican Mafia. Barella had a slight twitch on his face when he first began to talk, stuttered, and always greeted other carnales by kissing them on both cheeks as if he were some foreign diplomat. He sat in his cell and read the Bible every day. At the same time, as one veteran detective noted, Black Dan had a kill first, talk about it later attitude. In 1980, Black Dan beat, kicked, and stabbed a San Diego defense attorney because he was dissatisfied with his work in the courtroom. Lawyer George Manning had represented Daniel Salomon, a friend of Black Dan's, in a federal drug conspiracy case. Salomon pleaded guilty, believing he would get 4 years in prison. Instead, he was sentenced to 15 years when the probation officer recommended a substantial period of incarceration. Barella accompanied Salomon to the lawyer's office, administered the beating, and ordered Manning to return his $8,000 legal fee. The frightened lawyer told police later that Barella said, "This was the only warning I would get. The next time, someone will be back and I'd be dead." He said if I reported the incident, he didn't care how long it took him, he'd kill me. Black Dan Barella had roots in a gang called White Fence, which was located in an East Los Angeles neighborhood where Boxer's grandmother and other relatives lived. He and Boxer would become acquainted for a week in the MCU, then Barella was transferred to San Quentin. A week later, that week would make a big difference in Boxer's life. In 1982, Boxer was transferred to San Quentin too. It was a rough place, partly because of a relatively new California Department of Corrections policy. 2 years earlier, the CDC had decided to no longer spread hardcore convicts out among all the different prisons in the system. Murderers, lifers, and other management control problems, which included prison gang members, were sent to San Quentin or Folsom. Prison administrators wanted all the rotten eggs in 2 baskets. Boxer was a mainline inmate in the general population at the Big Q, but he was given a prison job as a trustee or porter for the 5th tier in North Block. It was a maximum security unit that housed a bunch of Mexican Mafia and Aryan Brotherhood heavyweights. He met Benjamin Topo Peters from the Oil Soto street gang, and Topo introduced Boxer to other M Carnales. All of them were seasoned gangsters, hitmen, ranging in age from 41 down to 24, all but one a decade or more older than Enriquez. Topo introduced Boxer as the little brother Caja, which means box in Spanish. A porter's duties included bringing meals, delivering laundry, and mopping and sweeping floors. As a tier tender, Boxer was free to come and go, so he began conducting business errands for the M members as a runner. He ran messages called kites or huilas and moved drugs between inmates. There were dozens of hits, and he smuggled in shanks to the mafia guys so they could do their killing. In 1982, 3 prisoners in San Quentin were murdered, and 91 were injured in incidents ranging from stabbings to brawls. Boxer saw that deadly mafia politics accounted for a lot of the carnage. For example, Fat George was stabbed for falsely taking credit for a kill someone else actually carried out. Then Serious Steve was shanked because he reportedly grabbed Cuate's arm during the hit they did together on Fat George, attempting to stop him and saying it was enough. That was seen as inappropriate behavior. In another incident, mafioso Jerry Wino Dominguez was stabbed for stealing small amounts of drugs sent to the M in North Block, and Kiko Torres was cut up because he voiced some dissent about M politics. Prison social status bumped up quickly for the 21-year-old boxer Enriquez. He felt, wow, this is pretty cool. These guys are powerful. He could hear other inmates whispering on the yard as he went by, don't mess with him. He's got big homies, a term for M members. He's a camarada, another term for a mafia associate. He's on his way. Boxer was getting respect, and he liked it. Even then, I didn't aspire to be a mafioso. I just enjoyed this little position I was in. This little position of fame that I was placed in just by associating with these people. I benefited tremendously by just running for them. The inmates at San Quentin called North Block Hotel California. It's the name of an Eagles song that includes this lyric. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. It could have been written for the mob. This is a footnote that was at the bottom of the page. The Carnales included Serious Steve Murillo from El Monte Hicks, Daniel Cuate Grajeda of La Raña, Bill Haas Frisbee of Clanton, Richie Pinuelas of Role, Ruben Barella of Orange County, Michael Oso Contreras from Florencia, John Kiko Torres of Oyo Maravilla, and George Fat George Lopez of Riverside. The Aryan Brotherhood contingent included John Stinson and Ricky Turflinger.